Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran trying to buy back your publishing from the Michael Jackson estate, or else a scrappy upstart trying to sell your publishing to the Bruno Mars estate, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every songwriter seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey guys, it's the second Friday of May 2020, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to us by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Trent who drove a Pontiac Sunfire with racing stripes and who smoked Camel Crush purple mint cigarettes. And old Trent would charge you about $1,000 for a website that only had words written in the papyrus font, and that was obsolete in like 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. We don't have to deal with the Trents of the world anymore. We have Bandzoogle. We have nice things now. So Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. It has hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, social media integrations, mailing list tools. You can crowdfund your next project commission-free. There's so many great things about Bandzoogle. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code TWS, that's the initials of our show, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Thank you, Bandzoogle. If you would like to hear some of my music live in the coming months, the only place I'll be doing that from is a water-damaged basement in Prince George's County, Maryland. Every Sunday night at 9 p.m., I'm playing a free public concert on my YouTube channel. Just head over to YouTube, type in Joe Pug or Joe Pug channel, and then click to subscribe. This Sunday, I'll be playing my latest album, The Flood in Color, in its entirety, and then I'll take some requests. I'll also have a special guest, and we'll do some Q&A as well, so stop on by. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a few things that you could do. You could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. That would help me a lot right now in the age of coronavirus when I can't tour. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support a creative endeavor that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter or search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. If just 1% of our listenership kicked in the price of a cup of coffee every month, that would help me immensely. So that would be great. If you don't have the funds to kick in any money, I totally get that. I've been there before. You could help us by leaving us a rating in the iTunes store or simply mentioning us to a friend that you think would dig the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. I'll end the harassment there. This was a particularly interesting episode to tape. As you know, almost all the guests on this show are just friends of mine that I basically guilt into taping episodes and coming on the program. But in this case, we arranged the interview through much more, formal channels, much more, normal publicity channels. And I'm so glad that we did, because I don't know Shane personally, but his story is so compelling and he's so captivating at telling it. This was a really good chance for our podcast, for myself, and for our listeners to really get behind the curtain with Music Row. And it was absolutely fascinating. So I hope you enjoy Shane's story as much as I did. Born in Texas, our guest this week has come to be one of the most influential and most recorded songwriters in modern Nashville. After a few professional false starts in Nashville and Los Angeles in his 20s, Shane McAnally returned to the Music City in his early 30s and reeled off an astonishingly prolific streak. Consider this. Shane never had a cut to his name until age 33. And since then, in the last decade or so, he's had songs recorded by Kenny Chesney, Kelly Clarkson, Luke Bryan, Keith Urban, Miranda Lambert, and a host of others. He's won 3 Grammys, 3 ACM Awards, and a CMA Award, along with dozens of nominations. The Academy of Country Music named him Songwriter of the Year in 2014, and he was Billboard's Hot Country Songwriter of the Year in 2015. And unlike many other songwriters on Music Row, he hangs his own shingle. That is to say, instead of working for someone else's publishing company, he is CEO of his own publishing, management, and artist development company, Smack Songs. He's also helped Sony Music relaunch their Monument Records imprint, the one-time home to Roy Orbison, Dolly Parton, and Willie Nelson. And more recently, he landed what he has called the wildest dream job that I never even knew I wanted, as one of the stars on NBC's television show Songland, where he coaches young songwriters looking for their break. It's probably safe to say that Shane is the most recorded songwriter we've ever hosted on our plucky little program here, probably by a factor of 10. So we were very grateful that he took the time to sit down and tell us about his journey so far. Well, listen, thanks for sitting down with our show. I really appreciate that. Before we get to your first move to Nashville and your start, I saw something in your Wikipedia page that you moved to Branson at one point before you were even 18. Was that a move there with family, or did you move there to perform?
I moved there to perform. I was 15, and I moved with a group of I was actually the oldest member of this band that had a gig basically playing at the Bobolinks Theater, and that the group that played there and were a popular local act were called the Texans, and we were sort of like billed as like the Young Texans. And so we would play 7 shows a week and walk up and down the strip and hand out flyers. And it was the gig didn't last. It wasn't like I missed some school in Texas, but it was like, I was there for 7 or 8 months.
But still getting those chops, getting to perform 7 days a week for 7 or 8 months, that's kind of like your Beatles in Hamburg moment, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I had already at that point been 3 years from about the age of 12, I started doing Opries around Texas, Oklahoma. There's a whole circuit of Opries and these reviews. And so I would play with the house bands, and that had kind of become a regular, I'd write songs and save up money and go in the studio and little local studios. I worked in radio in my hometown, so I had access to some studio stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it just kind of seemed like the next thing was to just try and go and do a full-time job for the summer and beyond, And
it sounds, your parents must have been very supportive if they let you move at that age to go do a gig.
My grandmother and my mother were, they sort of traded off. And my grandmother stayed a lot of that time in Branson, sort of as a house mother. There were other parents that came too. And they would trade off. But yeah, they were supportive, definitely. I'm more supportive than, when I graduated high school, I think that's when it probably got questionable of like, okay, are you going to go do this for real? Because when you're young and you're still, it's almost novelty.
Right.
So I think the concern or the question came in after I graduated high school, and really came in a year later when I quit college and moved to Nashville. I think that's when it was like, wait a minute, but yes, very supportive of music.
Now you kind of had 2 bites at the apple with Nashville. Once, when you were about 19 and then later on in your early 30s. Tell me about that first time around in Nashville. You came to town And what did you do? How did you get your foot in the door?
I went straight to the Bluebird Cafe the day I got there, and it happened to be on the day of the week. Maybe I don't remember what day of the week it was, but I know now they do this on Mondays. But I just happened to go on the night they had open mic, and they would put your name in a hat because there were far too many people there to perform. And my name got drawn, and I had never really played songs I had written for people. I'd recorded some, but it wasn't like I had stood in front of people. I always sang covers. And so I was in a room full of songwriters, and I sang a song, and the reaction was enough to make me go, this is what I want to do. So I then went back to Texas to get my stuff. I was at the University of Texas at the time in Austin. Mm-hmm. I finished out the semester, and then I went back to Nashville right away. And, you know, I think I was just so naive, and I know a lot of people go to Nashville like that. I just kind of was like, I knew one person, and they had a friend at Curb Publishing. And so when I got to town, I went via this friend setting something up through a friend of a friend, and I went and played some songs for this woman at Curb Publishing. And I started a relationship there, and that sort of got me in the door. And then 6 months later, I had a publishing deal and a record deal. And I was 20 years old. And so I just kind of thought, this is it, you know. And then I spent the next 4 years trying to write for a record, trying to figure out, you know, at that point I had only written by myself, so I hadn't really gotten into the Music Row writing scene. And then, you know, started making a record, and around 98, which would have been when I can't even do the math, but I was around 24 probably. Yeah, that's right. I was 24. Put out my first single, and it didn't really catch, but I had a really great manager, and I was on the road with Alabama and some other huge acts getting to open for people. And then we put out a second single, and it didn't really catch. And then the third single really didn't catch. And I just kind of felt like I was chasing some elusive dream that I, you know, as I've said many times, I wrote a script before I went to Nashville, and nobody was reading from it. And I was just really mad. And not only mad that the things weren't working out, but mad that it had taken me 6 years to even find out that it wasn't going to work. And I just felt burnt by Nashville. I was in the closet. And that was a whole nother thing that I wasn't telling anyone, but that was certainly causing just incredible amounts of stress and probably making the music seem inauthentic at some level and people not knowing why. And then on a whim, I went to Los Angeles just to get away. I had a friend that was also my publicist who had a place, and she wasn't using it, and I just went and stayed there, and it was going to be for a couple of weeks, and it was almost 8 years. And I don't even really know what I did during that time. I mean, I bartended, I played shows at Hotel Cafe. I kind of went into this singer-songwriter world where I went back to writing songs by myself, but without rules, because I knew that I wasn't really looking for a genre. And I think that was sort of those were my really formative years, you know, and where I started to find music outside of Nashville. And I remember I heard, like within my first week of being in LA, there was a Virgin Records right up the road from where I was staying, and they used to just play music out in this courtyard. And I heard David Gray, and that was so different to me, and it was so sparse, and I loved his melodies. And I bought that CD, and then I just started imitating it, and then it kind of grew from there. You know, a year into that, Train put out Drops of Jupiter, and that became, to me, like, I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. And so, I mean, Drops of Jupiter to me is a country song. It still would hold up in that world. And there was just something about the cadence and the storytelling, and it wasn't linear. And, you know, I just was like, oh, this is it. And I started trying to make music like that. And I would play these songwriter nights at Hotel Cafe, and I had a really good following, and I could sell out these small venues, and I would record my shows and then sell the live CDs at the next show. But I did that for years, and nothing changed. It just felt like, you know, everybody had a friend of a friend who was going to send somebody from a record label, and it just never happened. And so in 2007, I got this publishing deal that was sort of like really like an investor situation. Like somebody had a lot of money and wanted to get in the music business. And I was just so hard up for money of any sort. I was cater waiting. I was doing everything I could to stay afloat. And they were going to pay me a lot of money to write songs. And they just had all these big dreams. They just didn't know what they were doing, and I didn't care. Mm-hmm. And so I took this advance. I ended up buying a place in LA. All the while these years have been spent like truly coming out to myself, to my family, to my friends and stuff back home in Nashville slowly. I mean, back in Nashville and back home in Texas. And so I bought this place in LA, and I bought it right before the crash.
Oh boy.
And I lost my place and all the money I had put into it. And that company, just as I suspected it would, when they ran out of money, they just went away. And so I lost my house, I lost my car, I lost my gig, and I went through a big breakup. And this all happened within like a 6-month period. And I just was like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. I was 33 years old, and I just felt like I had spent, at that point, 20 years since, like I said, the age of 12, chasing something that just wasn't going to work out for me. And I would pray for another passion. I would pray for somebody to show me, you know, something that would be interesting to me, because I knew I had ambition and I could work hard, and I'm a smart person, but I didn't have any experience other than music and waiting tables. And everybody else had gone and gotten degrees and gone down the roads that you're expected to, and gotten enough life experience and work experience that they were starting to have real careers, families, jobs. And I was just like, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. And I went to Nashville.
Real quick though, Shane, how come you didn't throw in the towel right there? I mean, you're 33 years old, hasn't worked out so far. You have no other skills. That's a place where 98% of people just say, you know what? I gave it the old college try. No one can say that I didn't try. I'm going to go get a degree.
I kind of did. And this is, so I had a friend who was in the real estate business and who knew a real estate, a guy who did real estate in LA who was looking for like a protege. His business had gotten so big and he was selling these huge properties and he was making, you know, millions of dollars, and he was going to let somebody come in sort of under him. I borrowed a suit and I went into this big glass building up on Sunset in this huge lobby with all these people in suits. I'm sitting there in a borrowed suit. I know that enough social cues. I was given the gift of that sort of charisma that I could be whatever someone needed me to be. So I didn't worry about like having an interview or what I could do. I knew I could do the job and probably get the job. But what happened was sitting there, the only time I could ever say I've had a panic attack was sitting in that lobby and watching these people talking on their cell phones about selling properties. And it was like a movie. It started to echo in my head. I was drenched in sweat and I just left. And in the same time, my little sister was living in Nashville at this point. She had moved from Texas to Nashville to go to school at MTSU. And I just went to see her. And I wrote a song while I was there with a friend of a friend of a friend who, I mean, I had no business like being in a room at Universal Publishing, but that's where I was. Mm-hmm. She had a publishing deal there. And we wrote a song. And and it was Halloween, and I think it was 2008. And we wrote a song called Last Call that I knew was really great. Mm-hmm. It was like, holy shit, this is like a real commercial competitive song. And Leanne Womack, who, you know, was someone that I had always loved. She was my favorite country voice. And right away they put it on hold. I had been out of the Nashville scene for long enough to forget that getting a hold doesn't mean shit. Right. But I was naive enough again. It was like I was new to just be like, oh my God, like this song's on hold. Everything's going to change. Mm-hmm. And then she recorded the song. And by the time she recorded the song, again, I had no business changing my life for this, because who knows if it's going to make a record, if it's going to be a single. She wasn't even on, like, she wasn't having hits. It wasn't like she, you know, this was years after I Hope You Dance. And so it was like the only glimmer of hope. So I just packed up and left LA. I just was like, well, I should be in Nashville, clearly. Mm-hmm. And all the things that could have happened with that song did. All the dominoes fell the right way, you know. And I owned all my publishing because I didn't have a publishing deal. And so here was this little song that went on to get nominated. Her performance went on to get nominated for a Grammy, and it spent 50 weeks on the chart. It wasn't a number one record, but it was a big hit. And so I wasn't going to get paid on that for a while. So I ended up going back to waiting tables. My sister worked at a restaurant. She got me a job at a restaurant in Nashville. It was as if I had never been there. Mm-hmm. And nobody that I knew would write with me. Nobody from before. For good reason. I mean, I was somebody that left, and all of them in those 8 years had gone on to become successful songwriters or artists, or moved into other parts of the music business, which is what you do when you don't make it in music, or when you don't make it as a creator. So they had moved on, and I had sort of stopped time and showed up brand new again. And lucky for me, I just couldn't get anybody to pay attention, because what happened was, right after that song had its run on the charts, I, through a friend that I had that was sort of on a handshake deal, started pitching my songs. The publishing company she was working for wouldn't sign me, so she did it as a side gig. And she pitched a song to Kenny Chesney called Somewhere With You. And that, when he cut that song, it was like the gates opened. I don't know what, Kenny Chesney is the ultimate get for a songwriter, because he's an incredible songwriter himself, and he leaves very few spaces on records for outside songs.
Right. And
so not only did we get one of those spaces, we were the second single off the record. It was a 4-week number one. And then I've been on every record since. And he sort of said, okay, this guy's got good stuff. That's what him recording and putting that song out was. Again, it was a song I wrote with one other person, so it was a two-way song, which is a big deal, because you own way more of the song, and I owned all of my publishing, which nobody did. Mm. So I had these two hits, Last Call and Somewhere With You. I owned 50% of the entire copyright of both of those songs. Mm-hmm. And then I had started dating my now husband, who lived in Atlanta, and he was in the mortgage business. Mm. And he was just total numbers, business minded. And I would talk to him about, the music business and songs and things like that. And I was trying to get a publishing deal. And at this point I could get one.
Right.
And I told him about this company that was going to give me $75,000, and they were going to take the publishing of the songs. They call it Schedule A, the songs that I had already written, including the songs that were already recorded. And, $75,000 for me was, that the year before that, my tax return, I had made $12,000. So I was like, and this is 2010, 2009, 2010. Yeah. And he just said, these numbers don't make sense to me. I don't understand why you would give up. Cause he knew then that what the songs would be worth, cause he had dug in and said, you're looking to make over $500,000 on each of these songs. Mm-hmm. That's $1 million. Why would you take $75,000 a year and give all that up? And I said, well, because that's sort of their cushion. It's like they know they're going to make money because I'm bringing in hits, but then they're going to turn that into a lot more hits. And that is what publishers do. And look, I'm a publisher now, and that's what I do.
Right.
So I understand the value in that. I was luckily with someone who just didn't. And he was like, no way. And I said, well, I'm also not going to get paid for a year. Mm-hmm. So I got to stay alive. And he was like, well, I'm going to pay for you to stay alive because there's no way you're giving that up. And ultimately, the woman who was pitching my songs on a handshake deal, her and I just set out to take all the money that we were making on those songs and just build a company around me. And that was all because my husband said we could. And it was just I don't even know. I mean, at that point, I was so scared of everything because I had lost everything. I don't know why I was up for that. I think I was sort of going whichever way the wind blew, and luckily it started to blow my way. You know, it was like I was just going to take what was right in front of me. And what happened was I had a friend, Trevor Rosen, who lost his publishing deal, and he had kids, and we had been writing a lot of songs together. And so we were just like, well, let's make him our first signing. Mm-hmm. So we signed Trevor Rosen in 2011, and he went on to be one of the lead guys in Old Dominion. And so that turned into, you know, the next 8 years of every hit they had. And then we signed Matt Ramsey right after that, who was also the lead singer of Old Dominion. And it just started to be like, oh shit, this is just happening, this company. And then along the, you know, side of that, I was having a windfall, like, honestly, like no one could have ever imagined, me included. It was as if those 20 years were retroactively coming back to me because I was just getting so many cuts. It just became very trendy to, you know, I had brought some phrasing, melody sense to Nashville that until Kenny Chesney recorded Somewhere With You, nobody thought would work. But because the King said it would work, it did. And everyone wanted those kind of songs, and I had a lot of them. So,
now, is that what you brought back from your time in Los Angeles and that moment that you had with David Gray's music and Train's music?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yes. Just sort of the combo of all of that, and then loving 70s California country, whether the Eagles and Jackson Brown, and all that just started to come around. And that was the kind of stuff I was writing in my room that everybody would say was too sensitive, that male artists would never say those things, and they did. And once Kenny did, they all did. So it was kind of crazy.
And it's interesting how it sounds like that songwriting evolution that you almost had like a songwriting coming out as well with your own coming out. It sounds like those two things were kind of hand in glove with one another.
That's very true. And I hadn't quite thought of it that way, but you know, when I went back to Nashville and I had a few songs and was trying to get that publishing deal, I would hear over and over, these songs are too sensitive. You're going to have a female sing them. There's really no females making records that they don't write. And so you're kind of stuck with all these. In my head, I heard the word feminine sounding songs. Mm-hmm. That was probably my own fear of someone saying, well, you're not going to be able to do this because you're gay. Mm-hmm. The songs were sensitive. They were sad. And so I again thought, well, that the gay thing is going to show up again. Not, you know, before it was because I was hiding it. Now it's because I'm putting it in the front. But ultimately, it was coming out because I was like, well, these are the kind of songs I write. And when I started to have success, I just leaned into that, right, and wrote more, and still do that. I mean, I still, you know, even if someone tells me all we want is a tempo, if that's not what I want to do, mm-hmm, I will say, well, let me just try to write you a ballad that talks you out of it. You know, it's like, let me try to write the one song on the record that you didn't think you would record. Right. And that was really, it started to work for me. I mean, again, I don't know that it was as intentional as what I just said, mm-hmm, but that was subconsciously what I was doing.
Now that the arc of Shane's life has bent for the better, it's easy to see all of it as a foregone conclusion. But the course it took would have been practically unimaginable for him during his final days in Los Angeles. Filing in and out of a real estate office in a borrowed suit, tending bar, losing a home to insolvency, it probably felt like an entire lifetime on its own. And when you get stuck in a rut like that, life gathers a kind of inertia that it's hard to break free from. The days rush by faster and faster. They gain a weight of their own. Let's hear the poet Steve Scafidi describe that feeling in his poem, The Way the Days Pass One After Another. The way the days pass one after another is the way water falls in a glassy sheet over rocks when the river is low, and stepping down through the valley. And the way the word divine is written slowly in a man's notebook where the ink shines a moment. And the way 10,000 feathers of a wild turkey go together over the river moving south. And the static on the radio. And all the elements of a sadness you cannot escape when you think of death. And the abstract new ache of middle age, and you might hope the fragments of a long sentence add up to something you can say out loud and be calmed and soothed by, knowing the list and timbre of words matter in the small room of your making, where the moon shines a moment, and a true rhyme clicks like a heavy door, and some redneck drunk on gasoline hollers your name as he drives by, and soon the people you know will no longer be. And so I return to this subject sad so constantly that I drink whiskey and listen to the mountain get in the way of the AM station in Front Royal, whose white noise is fine tonight, like the river's quiet passage from one place to another that is always going on and always going on, must be so ancient a feeling it is the thing divine the word was caused to be. And it rises in the air and moves across the land, devouring, devouring, and devouring. Talk to me a little bit about process. In your opinion, what are some of the keys to writing a song with another person?
Well, I think being authentic. I mean, that was, again, what I think troubled me my first round in Nashville. I was worried about pronouns. I was worried about people asking me if I was married. I was just on guard, you know. And I don't know if collaboration can actually afford being on guard, because if you're going to write a song, you got to have a fast forward intimacy. I've always said I think it's more intimate than sex, because these people, you have to really go in there and like say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through. For the song to relate, there has to be truth in it. And that is the number one thing for collaboration, is going in there and saying, let's lay it all on the table and hope that we can trust each other. I think trust is a big deal that you build up with people. And it's not just about them trusting you with their secrets. It's about trusting that your agenda and your ego is only there to serve the song, and not to worry about whether you win getting the right line or whether it's something you would listen to. The song has to be served. So I think that's where the trust thing comes in the most, is that I trust my co-writers are in it for the same reason that I am, which is we just want to let the song be written the way it wants to be written.
I got it. How has your actual process of writing songs changed over the years, or has it? Do you still write them in the same exact way?
Well, it's changed because, you know, one of the things that happened, the process, one of the things that inevitably happened, and I couldn't get around it, was that I always kind of considered myself this, I don't know, like an outlier, that I was going to write the weirdest song and just, you know, not worry about where it landed. Just like, I'm just going to write the song that people go, wow, I haven't heard it like that. Or, boy, that's a weird title. Or I don't know, even if it made you uncomfortable, I mean, that was something that I really liked. People being like, that song makes me feel weird. And I'd be like, well, good, because I'm trying to be polarizing to a degree. But what happened is you get a little bit eat up with the success, and you start seeing a pattern of what works. And so you can't help but follow that. And what happened was, 5 years into the run, I started realizing I could do it like paint by numbers. It was like, I know what works. I know what people are looking for, especially if you write it with an artist. You have an advantage. And, that got a little mundane to me.
Yeah.
So the process changed because, one, my collaborators changed from just writing with songwriters that I felt like were just there to write the song in the room, not worry about who was recording, to then it changed to, gosh, your time could be spent. You could do a lot less work and have a lot more success if you would just pay closer attention to when someone's recording, what kind of song they were looking for, the artist that wanted to co-write. And I did that for a long time, and it was fun too. And I made some really, really great friends that way as songwriters, and lifelong collaborations that will still happen. But I also did a lot of stuff I didn't want to. And I kind of just chalked that up to, that's just what you have to do. That's any job.
Right.
And then I got to a point in the last year, maybe a little longer, where I decided I didn't have to do that. I think I did that long enough.
Right.
I mean, there was a 5-year period where I would write, I would say 7 or 8 songs average a week.
Oh my gosh.
And, I don't even remember them. And it just became this, like, it wasn't all factory-like, because, among the replicas, there were these, like, shining stars that I'd be like, oh gosh, this is why I write songs,
Mm-hmm.
But there was a whole lot around that was just exhausting. And I was tense, and I was worried about staying on top. And so, yeah, I changed it. I mean, I think I finally got to a point where I was like, I think writing another country song that'll just be shipped out to radio and another number one to hang on the wall is no longer going to satisfy me. Those things will happen, and I'm so grateful. And I know that people that don't have that think, God, how could you be so arrogant? But I did it for a long time, and now the number one that gets hung on the wall matters less to me than the song that I wrote with someone that changed their heart or mine, whether or not it ever gets recorded. And they will, and they do, but it's not the quantity that I had before, because I'm not doing it as much, and I'm doing it much more selectively. And I enjoy the process so much, and I leave the day going, oh my God, that is why I write songs. And it doesn't matter if it gets recorded. I hope it does. Obviously, I mean, I have a business to run. I have tons of employees. I have a family and a lifestyle, but I did get to a point where I was able to sort of afford the life I wanted. And I know that that's going to continue regardless. So I'm going to write what I want.
Around that time, and I wonder if this goes hand in glove with you moving away from writing at such a clip, you began producing albums for many people. Can you speak to, in your opinion, what is a producer's job?
Well, it's funny because I never considered myself a producer. That because I'm not technical at all. I can play a little guitar, I play a little piano, and I know the number system that we use in Nashville because I've used it for so long. But
right.
I can't pick up any instrument. I can't tell you what bar where. I have to say, it's when they say this word, I like the way that feels. And so the reason I even started producing was because I was doing demos with Casey Musgraves and Luke Laird. And then also at the same time, I was doing demos on Sam Hunt and the guys of Old Dominion. These were songs we were writing for the world. We weren't making records. But a lot of times, for some reason, when we would be in the in the studio doing demos, I would get pushed up to the board. Basically, they would go, "Hey, I can't figure out how to get this right. Tell the drummer what you think he should do." Well, I don't know the term for it. So I would just go, "It needs to feel like this." And sometimes that might be a color, and sometimes that might be an adjective that sounds ridiculous, like shiny or crunchy. Mm-hmm. And what I found was that there was this really open-mindedness. I think the reason I hadn't done that prior to that was intimidation of not knowing the technical process. But the musicians were like, "I get it. I know what you're going for." Or if I had a reference for them. Mm. And so by default, I became a producer mostly on these songs that I was co-writing. And, that was because when we were writing them, we would already sort of be arranging and producing in the room, like, "Oh, we should put a banjo on this," or, "Wouldn't this be cool to have a steel guitar right here?" I think of a producer, for people that don't know what that means, I always say it's like the director of a movie. Mm-hmm. It's like the actors are there to actually pull it off, but somebody has to see it objectively. Right. And see what everyone else is going to see. And in my case, hear what everyone else is going to hear. I have a non-sophisticated way of listening to music. And that used to be the reason I wouldn't have called myself a producer. Now it's the slight that I lean into, because I say over and over, I listen to music the way everyone else does. I'm looking for a feeling that I can't put my finger on, and I really don't give a shit how musical, how many chords, how perfectly played that solo was. I'm looking for a feeling. And I'm lucky enough that I had some success as a producer early on, that people trust that feeling. Because ultimately, that's what, to me, would make a good director or a good producer. It would be the confidence that the people around you trust you. And so that's really the only time I can make a record. I still don't consider myself a producer of, when people call up and they say, "There's a new artist, he's looking for a producer." I'm like, I don't do that. What I do is co-write with someone, and we have such a common view of the world, or the way the music will sound, or we stumble into something. That's what happened with Casey. That's what happened with Sam. That's what happened with Midland. We stumbled into something together. And then I go, okay, I could produce your record, probably with help. But that's because I'm hearing what they're hearing. But someone just handing me an artist with songs and saying, "Produce a record," that sounds, I've tried it a couple times, mm-hmm. and even had some hits that way. It was just close to terrible. It felt more like a job than any bartending or waiting tables job I ever had, because I felt like I was on the spot. I felt like people were looking at me for some secret ingredient that I don't have.
You felt like you were in the borrowed suit all over again at the real estate office.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And luckily it was in music, at least a world where I can somewhat fake my way through it, yeah. which I couldn't have done in real estate. But anytime I start to fake my way through something, my heart starts beating fast. I start feeling like everyone's going to, quote, find me out. And so I like to stay in that comfortable part of where, like, I know how to make a Midland record because I'm there for the creation. I was there when they came to town, and they sat in my office and said, "This is sort of what we're doing, but we'd love to find a sound with you." I was there digging it up, and they trust me. And so that makes it fun. But just, again, I've had some really huge opportunities come my way that I did try just because I was like, well, I can't say no to this. Mm-hmm. And it's exhausting. Again, I feel like a monkey dancing. Like, what about this? What about this? What about this? And the truth is, I don't know, because I wasn't there for the creation. Jumping in on someone's sound it just doesn't work for me. And then I know producers like Dan Huff, who is a genius at this. He produces so many different acts and makes them all unique and all sound great. He can do anything. He can play anything. He is a producer, I'm a songwriter that also produces.
Talk to me a little bit about Songland. You've said that when you were first going for this gig on TV, they were saying at first, "Hey man, we like you, we like what you're about, but you don't have any experience in television, so this is a long shot." And you basically looked them in the eye and told them that it was your destiny to be on it. And lo and behold, you got there. Why was being on this show your destiny, and what was the process of going about getting onto this show and getting it started?
Well, I started to, about 5 years ago, I would play, so we always play the Bluebird, the rounds and things like this. And I started to, because I did move to Nashville initially to be an artist, and I had played on stages forever. And little by little, even after the LA run, little by little that went away because I'm writing songs in a studio. And I kind of thought, well, I mean, this is what is meant for me, because I'm having so much success as a songwriter. I'm clearly not supposed to be in front of a crowd. But what would happen is I would go and do these storytelling nights or play shows with Josh Osborne and Brandy Clark and Casey, these writer rounds. And I would be so filled up by it, by the interaction with the people and telling the stories, or sometimes crying together, sometimes laughing together, but it being more than just, here's a song that I had on the radio. Mm-hmm. And it really started to tug at me. And I didn't know if that meant I should make a record. The idea of getting up and singing in front of everyone did not sound right. It was like, no, that's not it. Meaning like with a band and opening for people and trying to be an artist. That didn't sound right. And I knew it was more than just sitting in a small room, telling stories of how I wrote the songs. There was something else. And I didn't know what it was. It just sort of was out there, and I'd pray about it and meditate on it and go, I know there's something else. Something will come along that will make sense. And I got a call about this show that when Audrey Morrissey, the lead producer, called and said, Adam Levine and Dave Stewart have created this show about songwriters, and Ryan Tedder and Esther Dean are going to be on it. I literally went, yes, I'm in. It was like, I don't care if you have us like on a unicycle in bikinis. I want to do something with the list of people you just named on television. And honestly, what their first pitch of the show was so different, and it scared the hell out of me. And I really didn't know how I could do it, because they had it set up originally more like a Shark Tank vibe, where I might say, you know what, I like your song, I can get it to Kenny Chesney. And then Ryan Tedder would say, well, I can get it to Adele. And so we were going to compete that way. I was terrified of that, and I did not think it would work, because I was like, how can you ever assure that any of these people are going to record these songs?
Right.
But it was still so close to this manifested idea of the performance I had missed. I know how to talk, and I know how to be myself in front of a crowd, in front of a camera. And I don't think that's easy for people, but for some reason it is for me. I'm not different if a camera's on me or not. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think I'm better. I for some reason, I have the ability to even be a little more authentic. That's weird, I know, but because I started to really see through the years, I saw the more vulnerable I was, the more of myself I revealed, the more people liked it. So that becomes almost like a drug. It's like, what else could I say right here? Even though it's the truth, I could pull out like all the years I did drugs in LA, and people go, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. But people go, but I understand it. I relate to it. So you have this sort of hat trick of being honest, because I have had a crazy life. I mean, my dad was in prison when I was 12, pull that out and say, now look at me. And so my point is, I know how to do those things and how to keep people interested. And it also is really rewarding to me when people say, gosh, when you told that story of coming out in Nashville in the good old boys club and going on the bus with Luke Bryan and being afraid that he knew you were gay, that really hit me. And so that was something I knew how to do. So I just thought I'll just go on there and sell them with my personality. How I'm going to do this Shark Tank thing, I have no idea. But luckily, the show evolved. And honestly, in its evolution, like what you just talked about, it evolved past me. And everyone was going to remain but me. And that was because I wasn't famous. Yeah. And not only was I not famous, I mean, I really had they had no way of knowing if I could be on camera. Mm-hmm. And I went and met with some people at NBC, and they were like, yeah, I mean, he's fine. But let's talk to some more people that could get us viewers. And a testament to Nashville is they did that. They talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people said, you know who you should get for this gig? Shane McAnally. And that was just so telling to me. It was my destiny. And when they came back to me, or actually I went to them and just said, what's going on with this? I hear you're talking to other people. And they said, yeah, we just didn't feel like you're a fit, but hopefully we can do something in the future. And I don't know, it just came out of me. I had never said anything like that, but I was just like, I'm going to be on that show. You can talk to everybody you want to.
Yeah.
But I know that seat is mine. It's already been decided. And that changed me. Saying that and it working out changed me, because I know how much I believed it.
Yeah.
And I know that that's real, that the power of manifesting, the power of creation that way and believing it, it's real. And I know a lot of people would say, well, I imagine myself rich and I'm not. And yeah, that's true. But it's getting to a point of, I wasn't attached to it. Like, I believed it was mine. But I also, if it hadn't been, I wouldn't have been like destroyed. I wasn't attached because the thing was, I knew it was coming. And I believed that if this wasn't it, then there must be something that I'm missing. But, you know, I was pretty certain. And so I think it's that attachment that keeps people from fulfilling those kind of dreams, because they're like, I have to have this. And I see this in artists all the time now. It's so clear to me why I wasn't a hit artist, because I thought that was the only thing that was going to make me happy. And so it took over a decade for me to start to let go of that and let the real dream unfold, which was much better and bigger than I could have ever imagined if I had been a hit artist, and especially in the closet. I mean, in my early 20s, if I had had a hit record, I don't know that I could have honestly survived. I mean, like, I don't know if I would have made it alive, because I got into drugs. There would have been so much hiding. Yeah. And I would have been so afraid to let go of any sort of success I'd had. So I know it all happened the way it was supposed to for me, and I'm really lucky, but that's sort of why I thought the show was my destiny, because I mean, that sounds so dramatic. The show is my destiny, but I knew something like this was, because I wanted to do something. I wanted to do something that satisfied that performance part of it and get that heart-to-heart, face-to-face feedback. And although it's not an audience we're in front of the camera, and I know that people are seeing something they haven't seen before, and that I'm a part of that.
It kind of sounds like what you just said there echoes back to what you said of when you first moved to Nashville, that you had a script written in your mind, except people weren't saying the lines that you'd written for them. Now, in the future, you had a script and it did work out. Do you think that idea of having a personal narrative, believing, basically wishing on a star that's your own, do you think that kind of came out of, you mentioned that your father was in prison when you were 12, so that sounds like a pretty chaotic lifestyle. Do you think that belief in destiny, that belief in a personal star, came from your experience growing up?
Yeah, I think you almost live in an imaginary world at times, because that's your only escape, I guess. You know, you kind of have to make up what you want your life to look like. And I mean, so many dreams that I had as a kid that I didn't even know I was putting into motion. You know, things like, when I was really young, I was obsessed with Barbara Mandrell, which should have been very telling to my mother that I was gay, but nobody knew that kind of stuff. Yeah. But that's a joke. But so I loved her. I would like see her TV show. I was very young. It looked so opposite of my life. It was so apple pie and, you know, glittery, and she was playing all these instruments and everyone loved her. And I just thought she was wonderful. And I still do. I love her. And then to move to Nashville, have the career that I've had, and now I know her. Like, it's weird. I have all these connections to her. I ended up singing in her son's wedding. That was years ago, but like, I know this person, and it feels like, I know everyone doesn't get to meet their heroes, but I do think that's just one of many that I could go, I was putting that into motion, as a little kid. Another thing that happened was I used to watch Hee Haw with my grandparents on Saturday night, and that was like my favorite thing to do. And then, a few years ago, Gaylord came to me and asked if I wanted to write the music to a Broadway musical based on Hee Haw. And that started a process of now that has evolved into something else that is going to Broadway. And it's not Hee Haw, but it started that, it sort of started that rolling. And it was like, oh, of course Hee Haw would show up. And then, a few years ago, I was actually, right before that call happened, I went and saw a Broadway musical for the first time. I went and saw Book of Mormon. And I was with my husband. We saw the original cast of Book of Mormon. When it was over, as funny, as uplifting as it was, I was crying. And he was like, "What's wrong?" And I said, I want to do that. I want to do that. And it was 2 years later that they called about that Broadway musical that not only tied my childhood love of Hee Haw to just the fact that somebody called me about writing a musical. Yeah. And now we're headed to Broadway. And it's, these things that you put into motion that maybe you don't even realize. It's like, I didn't then seek it out. I just said it and said, I want to do that. I don't know how to do that. But it kind of then putting it out there and and paying attention to when the signs show up, like, going, this isn't what I thought it would look like. Not doing that as much as just going, oh, you know what? Maybe I need to look at this. And so I'm trying to just stay in the flow that way. And I think that you were talking about the little kid dreamer aspect of it. Yeah. Yeah. It certainly comes from that part of us that, people that have everyone has childhood shit. Mine is far less worse than most people I know. But I do think that is what gave me the ability to really dream.
Shane, you are a busy man and you have been very generous with your time. Thank you so much.
Oh man, thank you. I really enjoyed talking about myself.
Well, that's what this show is for. That's exactly what this show is for.
I really enjoyed your question. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, brother. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
That's our show for this week, and it was brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Shane McAnally is one of the stars on NBC's Songland, with new episodes airing Monday nights at 10/9 Central. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.